Steven Universe and all associated images are property of Cartoon Network, Rebecca Sugar, and any and all other respective owners. I don't know them all. All footage in this video has been used for the purpose of critique parody under fair use. Please support the official release. Garnet is my favorite gem character in the show, but it's no secret that her characterization hasn't been as, let's say, in-depth as some of the other characters. And I can fully understand why. Garnet, as a character, is made up of traits that just make it tricky to characterize her. First of all, despite the fact that Garnet does enjoy interacting with others, she's not very outspoken, she's not very outgoing. She's very reserved and introverted and tends to spend a lot of time by herself. Even when she is around others, you could describe her as spending time by herself. She's usually off to the side, acting contemplative rather than interacting with anyone around her. She also only really seems to have two real reactions to things, at least everyday things: stoic indifference or stoic amusement. This likely stems from the fact that Garnet is a fusion of a very stoic gem and a very emotional gem. The stoic gem being Sapphire and the emotional gem being Ruby. And while her physical form seems to take after Ruby, her personality seems to take after Sapphire. That's why Garnet's extremes are so, well, extreme. Let's look at her anger, for example. When Garnet becomes angry, it's sudden and explosive. This comes from her Ruby side. Ruby's emotions are always right there by the surface. And being that Garnet is a fusion, her emotions are going to be even more difficult to handle in stressful situations. We did learn in Mindful Education that stressful situations can cause a fusion to see things that aren't even there. Garnet's sudden and extreme anger is something that's always kind of annoyed me. It's not that I think she'd ever hurt Steven or anything, it's just it always bugged me why there was such a dichotomy to her character. It was after the reveal that she was a fusion that it started to make sense. And the quest to understand Garnet's characterization isn't helped by the fact that Garnet doesn't talk about herself. Ever. Look at how often we've had to get information about Garnet from other characters. We first learned that Garnet goes on missions by herself sometimes from the other crystal gems. And when we first saw Garnet's third eye, it was an entirely visual reveal. There was no exposition about it at all. And of course, most interesting of all, look how long it took for us to learn that Garnet was a fusion. I mean, yeah, the clues that she was a fusion were right there. But if we'd actually seen more interactions between Garnet and any of the characters, really, I don't think the crew would have been able to stretch how long that reveal took out quite as long as they actually did. You kind of get the sense that when she's just with the other gems, she talks about herself more often, that it's kind of something that she's learned, just that she doesn't talk about herself much around Steven for whatever reason. Maybe it's just because she's known the other gems for so much longer. But even if that's the case, because we see the show from Steven's perspective, we don't hear about Garnet very often from Garnet's perspective. And I think that a big part of the reason why Garnet acts the way that she does and seems so detached and has such subdued reactions is in part because, of course, as I've already mentioned, Garnet is a fusion. Even if she is stoic in part because she takes after her Sapphire side, it's also reasonable to assume that she's so detached most of the time because the two halves of her are literally having conversations in her head. Not even just with each other, either. Based on what we know about fusions, if a fusion has a defined enough individual personality that's grown to a point where it has traits independent of its components, that persona can appear within the mind space of that fusion as well. So Garnet is sometimes literally a three-way conversation all in one person. It makes perfect sense that she would be stoic. It makes perfect sense that she would sometimes be distractible too. And of course, when talking about Garnet's nature as a fusion, it's also important to mention Garnet's fear. Garnet is very clearly afraid of Homeworld. In fact, she's made a lot of mistakes because of how afraid she is of Homeworld. She almost seems more afraid of Homeworld than her components do, which actually makes sense if we look at it from the perspective of anxieties being magnified in the mind of a fusion. It's almost a contradiction in terms that Garnet, who is often stoic and collected and wise, has such an extreme reaction to this threat. The fact of the matter is, she was so afraid of the diamonds, so afraid of Homeworld, that she ignored the fact that they were clearly coming back because she was afraid to admit the truth. And all of this is well enough, of course, but Garnet's also someone who is canonically concerned with being cool. She has a certain style that she likes to keep to. It's even been said by the crew that Garnet tends not to ask people questions because she likes to seem like she always knows what's going on around her. Part of the reason why Garnet is so detached and stoic is because she's trying to be mysterious. I bet it's a big part of why she put off telling Steven that she was a fusion for so long too. And all these things kind of mesh together to make her a really difficult character to write for. And yet I think that's a huge shame because I think the unique nature of Garnet amongst main recurring characters in this show opens up so many interesting writing possibilities that the crew hasn't really done anything with yet. There's a trend online of fans interpreting Garnet scenes from Garnet's perspective, complete with Ruby and Sapphire, working through the conflict in the scene from inside inside Garnet's head. And yeah, those are made by fans, and yeah, they're meant to be funny more than anything else, but I actually think that's a pretty accurate interpretation of Garnet as a character. I would absolutely love to see something like this explored in the show itself. Granted, that would probably mean a shift from Steven's perspective to Garnet's perspective, but maybe for something like a flashback episode, an entire episode from another gem's perspective that gives us insight into the war, into the gems themselves, something that's unique and not part of the main series somehow, so that the rule that only Steven's perspective is shown isn't actually broken. It's kind of wishful thinking, but it is something that I'm gonna continue to wish for. I just enjoy Garnet's character so much. Even though we have seen fewer meaningful Garnet interactions compared to other characters, she's already so multi-layered and could be so much more. Like, I know a lot of you guys don't realize it, but Garnet doesn't wear those shades to hide her third eye. She wears them because she likes them. I mean, look at her back in colonial times. She wore those round lens glasses back then that didn't cover her third eye at all. It's little details like that, little things that you can pick up about Garnet that make her so interesting to me. And I genuinely wish she was more of a focus in the show overall. It also wouldn't kill the crew to write more songs for her, because I mean, dang, Estelle is a great singer. I guess the point that I'm trying to make here is that while Garnet is a character who hasn't been focused on much and who the crew seems to shy away from writing characterization for, we can actually glean quite a bit about her. And there is one area in which I think Garnet's characterization has been well fleshed out and just overall really successful, and that's her interactions with Stevonnie. They're rare because Stevonnie appearances are rare, but some of the best reactions we ever get from Garnet are when she's around Stevonnie. And the episode Mindful Education set Garnet up as something as a mentor to Stevonnie, someone who will over time pass down all of her knowledge to this new love-based fusion. This means that as appearances of Stevonnie continue to increase in frequency, it's very likely that we're going to start getting more frequent Garnet character episodes, and that is very exciting to me. I made a video recently about how I don't think Garnet is the ideal leader for the Crystal Gems, but maybe as Steven assumes the role of leader more and more, we'll get to see more and more of Garnet being an advisor or a mentor to various Crystal Gem characters. We've already seen a little bit of it with Peridot. If we do, it's going to be very interesting since Garnet was in an advisory role under Rose Quartz. Between all of this and Garnet's directness, which is often very humorous, and how often she is shown to just adore Steven, I can't help but think of Garnet as my favorite Gem character. She is underutilized, yes. She's undercharacterized, yes, but she is already one of the most interesting characters in this entire series. And I do think there's still a lot to learn about the character overall. What do you think of the character of Garnet? What things about Garnet stand out to you the most? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.